The early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, as I'm sure most will remember, seemed to be dominated by anxiety, uncertainty, and ambiguity. Governments scrambled to buy, beg, and borrow masks, gowns, gloves, and other protection for their healthcare workers. Others conveniently ignored the threat. The supply of oxygen and ICU beds was hopelessly inadequate, and not just in developing countries. Overstretched hospital doctors were using every antiviral drug they could find. Lockdowns and economic rescue packages were announced. In the months that followed, there were short-lived bursts of attention for supposed miracle interventions of dubious to zero scientific credibility, such as bleach, UV light, hydroxychloroquine, and ivermectin. Other pundits called for countries to simply let the virus rip through their populations to achieve herd immunity, as though mass death was inevitable and could simply be shrugged off. They were rightly shouted down. But as the pandemic kept spreading, so did a particularly selfish phrase, exit strategy. In other words, how could countries, usually rich and developed countries, put this all behind them as quickly as possible and get back to normal? How indeed? Testing and contact tracing, the traditional epidemiological tool to identify and then quarantine the infected to curb spread, couldn't be implemented because there were simply no plans for how to rapidly scale up and make available appropriate tests. There weren't anywhere near enough tests or capacity to test all the people with symptoms or those who had encountered someone who had symptoms for the virus. Our best way forward was to prevent infection, or at least to prevent its most severe effects. We needed a vaccine. Or more realistically, several vaccines. Vaccines are miracles of modern science. A small jab and some of the most feared diseases in history can be prevented, sometimes for life. But they are also complicated to make, distribute, and in some cases, given fear and misinformation, convince people to use. Plus, when it comes to fighting disease, politicians and the public tend to revel in stories of breakthrough therapies and heartwarming tales of new victories ticked off against humanity's natural enemies. Cures, tests, and treatment simply seem more exciting than prevention, though we know prevention is superior.